My name is Henry Lazenby. I am a senior reporter and multimedia journalist for the Northern Miner Group, writing for The Northern Miner and Mining.com. It's my pleasure to present this panel where we'll be picking our analysts' brain to see what their favorite commodities are for this next decade, an important decade it appears to be. So with that, I'll ask our panelists to start on my extreme left with Joe Mazumdar. Please introduce yourself briefly to the audience.
Right. Hello. Joe Mazumdar, editor, Exploration Insights.
Right.
Hi, I'm Chris Parry. I'm the founder of Equity.guru and noted raconteur.
Hi, my name is Gary Wagner. I've been an analyst for about 35 years. I do a daily article for Kitco Media titled After Hours, and I have a service called thegoldforecast.com.
All right, thank you. And with that, let's just jump right into it. So, Gary, starting with you, what is your favorite commodity for the next decade and why?
Well, in looking at all of the different precious metals, because that's what we're focusing on, I think that the one to really watch is palladium. And the reason behind it is the vast majority of production of palladium occurs only in two countries, South Africa and Russia. Obviously, with the military action when Russia invaded Ukraine and the embargoes and everything, it creates uncertainty as to whether or not they're going to ship it and how much. And I think over the next couple of years, that could cause supply issues. Of course, it's critical to the production of catalytic converters. They use other precious metals, rhodium, platinum, but it is the only precious metal that effectively takes out, I believe it's the actual carbon that's in it, so it's an essential component.
Absolutely. All right, and then Chris.
So I just had to fill my gas tank, and I'm pretty convinced that oil and gas has about a year left, that they're going to squeeze us for everything they've got and then just give up as we all switch to electric vehicles. When we do, there's all sorts of metals that we're going to need, like palladium being one. But I'm kind of looking beyond that. I noted today that it was said that 26% of the Texas electricity grid is going to need to be increased by 2026 just to handle the needs of people using crypto. At the moment, crypto uses enough electricity to power Argentina, and I don't see that changing. And I don't see anyone in the crypto market figuring out how to make it better. So we're going to need more energy. Solar's great, but the lights turn off sometimes. Wind's great, but you need, when the wind dies down, you need batteries the size of football fields to really make good use of it. So for me, uranium is the thing. If we'd invented nuclear energy today, there'd be 100 nuclear reactors planned across Canada by the end of the week. The fact that when we turn on Netflix, we're inundated with documentaries about Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and Fukushima. It sort of sets everyone back a little bit to say we can never do that again. But man, there's nuclear reactors on the back of battleships right now. Like, you could drive a nuclear reactor up to northern Saskatchewan and plonk it down and be in business. We need to start looking at what is going to be the real green energy for the next 10 years. And it might take us 3 or 4 years to get through the teeth gnashing and the hand wringing before we actually start planning more nuclear reactors. But I see it as being inevitable. And if we don't do it soon, then energy is going to be going the way of oil and gas. We're going to be wondering whether we should turn on the AC today or save some money.
All right, and Joe.
Yeah, I guess I would focus in on the infrastructure, and one that works very well in the whatever scenario you're talking about would be copper. And as much from potentially demand, right now the demand problem is the zero COVID China policy, which is actually lowering demand for all commodities and giving us some weakness that we should probably take advantage of, because medium and longer term the issue is supply. We're having a harder time permitting in 2 of the biggest producers of copper, in Chile and Peru. As we know, it's harder and harder to actually permit anything in the States. Although they want copper, they don't actually want mines. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out. So we need more copper development projects. And just the timing, like I remember when I worked for Phelps Dodge as a copper market analyst in 2003, we had the Resolution mine coming into production in 2010. It's now 2022. So yeah, these projects take a lot longer than people think. And I think copper is one thing to think about going forward and increase your exposure to it during these times.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's stick with the copper topic then. I wanted to circle back to this phenomena that it's getting harder to permit projects when, for instance, the US is really talking up its critical metal supply chain. But yet again, we're seeing one after the other significant mines getting blocked or, just getting the can kicked down the road. How do you read this and what's the solution to this eventually?
Well, right now, in terms of my own portfolio, I've switched my copper exposure to companies in the States that are either in Nevada, which has not got a lot of copper exposure, or on private land. Because the problem is it's not just permitting. With Trilogy and South 32 on the Ambler Access Road, which was being advanced by the actual Alaska State Fund, they actually had a permit, which took 5 years to get. I don't know, it was a 1,000-page document. They had it for 2 years, and they basically suspended it. So even if you've got a permit, you don't even know if you really have it. And this current administration seems to be really weak on stopping the NGOs or small groups from really tripping up major projects that, like in Trilogy's case, you had the First Nations supporting it that were right there. You had a major company that does a lot of work on tailings, doing the right thing in terms of advancing the project. You had the state government, highly supportive, state senators, and the only opposition was from, maybe 50 people that were worried about subsistence hunting right near where the road comes into the Dalton Highway, and that stopped, a multi-billion-dollar project.
Would you say there is an intentional or unintentional deference by the U.S. to other countries to, secure their future copper supplies? Last week at the Mining Indaba in Cape Town, I certainly picked up the sense that, Africa is the go-to place to fill the gap when the U.S. is shutting the door on many of these projects.
Yeah, but I mean, that was taken by the Chinese. They built the infrastructure. They got in there on the ground floor, so it's tough for the U.S. to get in there now. It's tough for anybody to get in there now, especially given the amount of infrastructure they already invested. What their problem is not just producing copper, because if you don't produce cathode, you have to produce a concentrate. There's no smelting capacity in the Americas. So it all either has to go to China, Korea, or Japan. So it's not like even if Trilogy builds its mine in Alaska, that we're going to get copper cathode in the States. It's still going to have to go somewhere to get refined. So not only do they need to build the mines, they need to build the downstream facilities, and that's another thing that they have to work on.
Right, thank you. And Gary, circling back to palladium, I've seen several forecasts being thrown around these halls today, and also I think I've seen one from the EIA showing that out to 2050, the demand for palladium is significantly lower, and that, of course, as a result of reduced demand for catalytic converters. How do you respond to that? What's the future for palladium beyond catalytic converters?
Well, I mean, interestingly enough, when I first became a broker and an analyst, palladium was going for about $100 per ounce. Now it's the most expensive precious metal, excluding rhodium, but it's traded on the futures exchange. As we wean ourselves off of fossil fuels, absolutely the demand for that will diminish and diminish significantly, which is why when I look at what is the metals to look at over the decade, palladium short term, but then I see a big pivot moving into silver. And that's because there will be such a high demand for solar panels. Of course, there's hydro, there's wind, There's other ways to have clean energy, but there is an abundance of solar energy available. Not every location can implement wind, for example, due to that particular location and how much wind they get, or hydro, if it's not a land area that has fast-moving streams. But solar power will, I believe, dominate maybe in 10 or 20 years. The timeline is what I believe is the big if, because there's a hesitancy from the large corporations that are producing oil to want that transformation to take place, and they would prefer to have it later than sooner. But one thing I do agree with, absolutely, is that the need for palladium will diminish substantially, and that's when you might want to pivot and look at silver, because it is still a very integral component in producing solar energy. And so I kind of look at that as, yes, the demand for palladium will go down, but the demand for silver will go up.
I've certainly heard many analysts talk about silver during these past 2 days. I want to ask you another question about palladium's sister, platinum. What's your reading on platinum's future demand over the next decade and the rise of the hydrogen economy?
Well, I think that platinum has a unique place, especially because it is used in hydrogen production. I think that that will not be as significant, of course, as the electrified cars using lithium batteries. But in terms of the actual applications for platinum, I see that over time it will diminish. These metals have specific chemicals that they bind with to take out some of the bad polluting aspects of burning hydrocarbons, and as that diminishes, the demand will also.
All right, thank you. And back to you, Chris, on uranium. That certainly seems to be the most vaunted commodity during the past few days that I've been listening to presentations. What struck out to me is the coming ban on Russian uranium. Can you talk a little bit more about just how this could affect the global state of, the fundamentals for the mineral?
Well, economic sanctions against Russia are going to affect every sector. So I'm looking very much at agriculture right now. Even with a market crash, even with everything slumping, agriculture stocks are rising. You've all been to the supermarket, you can all see why. The Russians killed the potash industry in Canada back about 5-6 years ago. They're killing themselves now, and the potash industry is going to come back. Uranium-wise, I think short-term geopolitical issues are always going to force things up, force things down. Supply is going to go up, supply is going to go down. If I'm looking 10 years ahead, or the next 10 years, I'm not really worried about the situation in Russia right now. That will end up where it ends up, and we will go back to pretty much life as it was. What I'm really looking at is honest to goodness, how the hell are we going to energize an entire global auto fleet of electric vehicles unless we're building more reactors? How are we going to energize a financial system that's balls deep into crypto that takes so much damn energy to do so little if we're not putting more reactors out on the ground? To me, the only issue here really is one of aesthetics. If you can turn the tar sands into the oil sands in 1 month, and if you can turn coal into clean coal over the course of a year, you can turn nuclear energy into some other phrase that doesn't make people freak out. And that's really the only thing that's stopping us right now. If we decided that we were going to create more nuclear energy, you know what? The cost of energy is going to drop. Are we going to have accidents? We have accidents at coal plants. We have accidents at bakeries. You know, the fact of the matter is that modern nuclear reactors are not built the same way they were in the 1970s in Russia. They're more than safe. And most of the problems that we've had with them have either been because someone placed one on an earthquake fault or had management that was beyond the pale of terrible. So for me, there's not a lot that I would be investing in beyond a year ahead of time, right? Like, if you look back 5 years ago, what you would have invested in for the future, it's all gone to hell. Oil and gas has come and gone and then come again, and it will go again. We had blockchain, biotech, we had psychedelics, cannabis. It's all come for 3 months and then gone in 6 months. So what my mother used to do of like hanging on to stocks for 40 years and just riding the dividend payments, you can't do that anymore. Every industry gets turned over in 5 years. So you've got to pay much more attention. But unless someone comes up with some way of creating energy out of lettuce leaves or fertilizer, we are going to make nuclear energy. So uranium is, regardless of the Russians and anyone else, fast forward 5 years, we'll be building them all in our backyards.
Yeah, all right, thanks for that. Okay, so this is an investment conference, so I'm sure the audience wants to hear some top picks. Let me start here on my extreme left with Gary. With your chosen commodity, Palladium, are there any top 3 companies you are following and you want to share with us?
Not so much companies. I stay away from trying to analyze mining stocks because there are so many variables and such a nuanced area of research to understand what a particular company has in the ground, what their management costs are. And to me, in terms of commodities, I want to look outside of precious metals, not as an alternative, but as a combination. And I agree with the statement about agriculture. Russia is a large producer, I believe the 3rd largest in terms of wheat export. Ukraine is number 5 for corn. There are droughts right now that are occurring in the United States. And the cost of grains has literally skyrocketed. I don't see that diminishing relatively quickly. As correctly stated by another panelist, Russia will work out in time and things will go back. They're not going to maintain their military action. However, the cost of producing grains and the issues that we're having with droughts and other things are going to dramatically keep prices of agricultural products high, and that is an arena that I would look at.
All right. And over to you, Chris.
So I'm somebody who looks at the market cap of a company first. And I know there are a lot of uranium companies that are close to production or in production that are worth 2.5 billion or 5 billion, or I kind of like to know that I can double my money on a couple of good news pieces. So I look at the explorer stage of the market. I work, conflict noted with Azincourt Energy, which is an early stage explorer up in the Athabasca that's almost raised enough cash to get through a market downturn without too much problem. They're doing the drilling, they're doing the work, they're a $25 million market cap. They can get to 50 million a lot quicker than NextGen can go from 2.5 billion to 5 billion, in my opinion. I like Sky Harbor. They're the largest landowner in the Athabasca, multiple JVs, multiple partners, multiple options, and a good core project that could by itself really move forward to something. I like Standard Uranium, which is a lot earlier in the process, but putting together interesting projects. They're doing the work, they've got a bit of cash in hand, and all 3 of those companies are down right now to a place where the market cap makes no sense. A $20 million company with $11 million cash in the bank, I'm there all day. I might not be there in 10 years, and I might not look at those guys to be moving into production at any time soon, but I know I can make some money out of those a lot quicker than I can by going to producers where the value has already been taken out by someone else.
Thank you. And Joe, I know you're not very keen on sharing top picks, so perhaps I can invite you to share some final thoughts on copper, anything else that we should take note of.
Yeah, well, I can give you one. Like right now in the current market, access to capital is vital. You want liquidity, trading liquidity, so you can get in and out. And it's very few copper companies that can give you growth. And so I visited, as we do in Exploration Insights, we do a lot of site visits. So I was in Brazil and I visited Arrow Copper. So Arrow Copper is a good market cap. It's managed by the people that put Taka Taka together, which was acquired by First Quantum. So it's got an excellent management team, and they're driving growth on 2 assets. But also, importantly, is like we talk about water and we talk about power. And that's what you need for any of these big projects. And strangely enough, this is the only project I've seen where neither one is a constraint. Water is not a constraint for them, and the power is 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Most hydro project, if you've got hydropower, like even in BC, you're talking 7 to 8 cents. Very rarely, impossibly, would you ever see 3.5 cents. So you got a very nice cost structure as well in terms of the growth, but importantly, they don't have to tap the markets. They went and got several $100 million of senior secured debt on a fixed rate, which is very important right now with rising interest rates. So that's another thing you don't have to worry about. So you get growth, excellent management team, great infrastructure, cheap power, all the water. So Arrow Copper would be mine.
Excellent. That's a wrap then from my side. Thank you very much for listening in.